What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you guys with another episode of What's the Word, Dirty Bird. I hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. Hope you guys are having a great Wednesday night. But with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the chat and say what's up to the fam. See how you guys are doing. We got Joseph Thornton in the building. What's good, Joseph? I appreciate you joining me. You were first in the chat tonight. Bubba Gump, what's going on, man? I appreciate you tuning in on this Wednesday night. I hope you guys are having a great week so far. It is Hump Day. Tell Sports and Gaming, what's going on, man? And Michael Walker, what it do, man? I appreciate you guys joining. Definitely make sure you guys hit that like, hit that subscribe button, also hit that share button. But we got some things we're gonna talk about tonight. The first thing we're going to talk about is some quick Atlanta Falcons news. So far this week in Atlanta Falcons news, we know that Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith, the head coach and GM, both are at down at the combine. They did do an interview yesterday, both Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith, and they basically talked about a little bit about free agency and talked a little bit about Matt Ryan possibly being extended. But that's going to be my first topic of the night. We're going to talk about what players we should extend. We're also going to talk a little bit about free agency and draft talk because that's the hot topics right now. And then, of course, we're going to do some fan Q&A as we always do. With that being said, what's going on, Ant? I see he jumped in. And what's good, Mike? Juju on that beat. Yeah, what's going on, man? The minister's in the building, but I appreciate you joining me tonight, man. Mike, y'all definitely go over to Mike's channel, hit that like and subscribe button. He's on his way to 7,000. I'm on my way to 2,000, and get my boy K Styles to 1K. He's on his way to 1K. Xavier Jones, he said, slit the throat of the Aints. What's going on, man? And Brian Peoples, what's happening, man? I appreciate you joining tonight as well. But with that being said, like I mentioned, not too much in Atlanta Falcons news, just Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot basically talking about the upcoming combine, which is going to take place this week. And they're down there interviewing players and things of that nature before the draft. But with that being said, this is kind of going to jump right into my first topic that I want to talk about tonight, which is players the Atlanta Falcons should extend. We heard, I believe it was early this week, one of the beat writers for the Atlanta Falcons, I think his name is Steve Weiss, if I'm not mistaken. He basically stated that the Falcons would look to extend Grady Jarrett, possibly look to extend Matt Ryan, and possibly look to extend Jake Matthews. Personally, I definitely think the first player that I would extend would be Grady Jarrett, because Grady Jarrett is the centerpiece of our defense. He's the guy that we're going to have to build around as far as this defense. He's kind of like the Aaron Donald of our defense. He's that guy in the middle, that disruptive factor up front on the defensive line. He's pretty much the only bright spot or the only dominant player on our defensive line. So you definitely have to build around Grady Jarrett. So being that Grady Jarrett is still really young, I think he's still under the age of 30, like in his mid 20s. You definitely can, we definitely should look to extend him and to create more cap space. They also talked about possibly trading Calvin Ridley to create like 11 million in cap space. So I definitely think that will happen as well. And then they also talked about Matt Ryan possibly being one of the last players that they would look to extend if it came to it, based off of what Steve Weiss was saying. But personally, I think the first player we should extend is Grady Jarrett. You continue to build a defense around him. He's that centerpiece, and he's shown over the years that he's a consistent, dominant player, a Pro Bowler, a perennial Pro Bowler, a perennial All-Pro. So you definitely build around him on the defense. On the offensive side of the ball, I know a lot of people don't want to hear it, because of his age. But Matt Ryan is the guy on the offensive side of the ball that I would definitely look to extend because he has that high cap number of like $48 million. I definitely would look at um extending Matt Ryan at least 2 to 3 more years because I believe Matt Ryan at this point is like 36, 37. We've seen guys like Drew Brees. We've seen guys like Aaron Rodgers. We've seen Tom Brady play into his 40s. And Matt Ryan really hasn't shown any rust. He hasn't shown any drop off in his game. To me, he's still playing at a really high level. So if I'm the Falcons, I'm extending Matt Ryan another 2 to 3 years to stretch out some of that money. And then maybe some of those years that we have on the back end could be voidable years. But I'm definitely looking to re-sign Matt Ryan. Now, as far as replacing Matt Ryan and bringing in a rookie quarterback, I know that that's a hot topic that everybody wants to know. Should the Falcons draft a quarterback in this draft? I'm not opposed to bringing in a backup quarterback because you have to start grooming somebody behind Matt Ryan. And being that Felipe Franks, from what I'm hearing, his contract isn't guaranteed. And then we only signed, I believe, Josh Rosen to a 1-year deal last year. You really don't have a backup guy that's being developed and that can be groomed by Matt Ryan. So I'm not opposed to bringing in a quarterback in this draft. I just wouldn't do it with that first pick, and I wouldn't do it with the second pick. I would possibly do it like in the third round, or maybe with that second, second round pick. I possibly would look at doing that, but I definitely wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't think about bringing in a quarterback with that number 8 pick because it's too high. We've seen the Green Bay Packers bring in Jordan Love, and Aaron Rodgers still played at a really high level. And Aaron Rodgers is older than Matt Ryan at this point. He's knocking on the age of 40. So being that we're seeing guys that are playing at a high level, like a Aaron Rodgers who won the MVP last year, I think he's won like 2 out of the last 3 MVPs. Being that Aaron Rodgers is still playing at a high level, I could see Matt Ryan doing the same. So at this point, I would just hold off on the quarterback until late in the later rounds and possibly bring in one of these guys, especially because none of these quarterbacks that I've seen in this draft, to me, are day one starters. They don't look like guys that's ready to come in and play. They look like guys that are projects that at least need 1 or 2 seasons to sit behind a seasoned quarterback like a Matt Ryan. So if you're going to bring in a quarterback like Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett or one of these guys, you bringing them in basically to sit behind Matt Ryan for a year or two. And if you extend Matt Ryan for like another year or two, you basically loosen up the cap a little bit so we can bring in guys to help us compete this year, because Terry Fontenot talked about, wanting our cake and eat it too, meaning we don't want to be just in rebuild mode, but we want to be able to win and kind of build the team at the same time or retool at the same time. And I think Matt Ryan gives you the best chance to win now. I do want to jump right into the chat really quick. Todd Rick, what's going on, man? I appreciate you joining tonight. Let's see. Tony Wright, what's going on, man? I appreciate it. You're not too late. I just started a couple minutes ago. What's going on, Darius? That's my brother-in-law. Shout outs to the brother-in-law. What's going on, bro? He says, Falcons Nation, relax. Matt Ryan isn't going anywhere. The team will get an extension done. Yeah, I definitely think Matt Ryan's going to definitely get an extension done as well. Tony Wright is really adamant about Christian Watson. I haven't forgot about him, Tony Wright. I definitely do one of my draft prospect videos on him, but I did get a chance to check out Christian Watson, and I was really impressed with the North Dakota State standout wide receiver. Yeah, I definitely think that he was a quality wide receiver. He says, no, Drew, our second round draft pick must go to drafting wide receiver Christian Watson. Yeah, I wouldn't be upset with that as well. They call me Yeezy. What's going on, man? I appreciate you joining me tonight as well. And make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. And let's see. He says, most likely it is going to be Matt Ryan last year. What do you think? I don't think so. I think Matt Ryan is going to be here another 2 to 3 years, believe it or not. As long as Matt Ryan is playing at a high level, I wouldn't push Matt Ryan out the door. We've seen it too many times with these quarterbacks that are Hall of Fame type quarterbacks. I can take it all the way back to Brett Favre. And the reason that Green Bay moved off of Brett Favre is because he kept debating retirement and then kept coming back out of retirement every year when it was around training camp time. He couldn't make his mind up whether he wanted to retire or whether he wanted to keep playing. And that's the reason they moved off of him and went with Aaron Rodgers, because he kept playing that cat and mouse game. But we remember Brett Favre going to teams like the Jets and then going to the Minnesota Vikings after the Jets and getting them to NFC championship game against the Saints, against the Bounty Gate Saints. So even at his old age, Brett Favre was still playing at a really high level, playing at an elite level where he almost got the Vikings, to a Super Bowl at his old age. So I believe you don't move off of a quarterback until they show decline. So if I'm the Falcons, I don't care if Matt Ryan is 40 years old or 41 years old. If he's still playing at a high level, you don't move off of a great quarterback. I mean, we've seen that with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They moved off of Jameis Winston and brought in Tom Brady, who was over the age of 40 at the time. He was like 43, 44 at the time when they brought him in. I think he was 43. So if you're still playing at a high level, the quarterback position is a hard position to find in the draft, and it's just hard to come by in general, especially Hall of Fame type quarterbacks. So even in Matt Ryan's, even though he's on the back end of his career, if we put Matt Ryan on the free agents, like if he was a free agent, or if Matt Ryan, if we put him on the trading block, it'll be teams knocking down our door to get a player like Matt Ryan if they are on the cusp of playing in the Super Bowl. And we've seen that with the Rams. They moved off of Jared Goff, who was a first round draft pick, and went with Matthew Stafford, who was in his 30s, in his mid 30s, which Jared Goff was still in his prime, in his 20s, and he had led the Rams to a Super Bowl with Todd Gurley. So it just goes to show I wouldn't move off of a quarterback. The quarterback position is one of those positions, like I said, where if you're playing at a high level, you don't move off of those type of guys, because it comes back. Usually it'll come back to bite you in the tail. And you can look at even the New England Patriots moving off of Tom Brady. They could have easily competed for another Super Bowl if they decided to keep Tom Brady and not allow him to go into free agency with the Buccaneers and just continue to build around Tom Brady. With that being said, let's see. Shout out to my boy 6Man K Styles. Y'all go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button at his channel. Like I mentioned earlier, he is on his way to 1,000. That's my bro, so I appreciate you joining me tonight. Let's see. What's going on, Jamarius? What's going on, man? I appreciate you joining me tonight as well. And the next topic that we're going to get into, which we're already kind of talking about, is going to be free agency talk and draft talk, which we've been talking about for the last couple weeks, and we'll continue to talk about it until free agency is over and until the draft is over. I don't expect the Falcons, which we heard Terry Fontenot state, I don't expect the Falcons to be big spenders in this free agency period. Just like we saw last year, the first wave of free agency probably will be quiet. I don't think the Falcons are going to do too much other than try to restructure some contracts, because we don't have the money. And right now we're over the cap, like $7 million over the cap. So until we can adjust some of these contracts, don't expect much out of the Falcons when free agency first breaks, unless it's some type of trade taking place where we're moving a first round pick, moving a second round pick. And at this point, unless you're getting a player like a Khalil Mack, or you're getting a player, of that caliber, I wouldn't trade. And even if you were to try to get somebody like a Khalil Mack or one of those guys like that, you still have to have the money. So at this point, I mentioned last night during Mike and K-Style show, I basically mentioned, like, we're going to be shopping at Dollar General and Family Dollar and Dollar Tree again this year, like in free agency. We're going to have to bargain bin and try to find a diamond in the rough, kind of how we did with Cordero Patterson. Like, we don't have any money right now to try to go out and sign one of these big name guys. And to be honest, another thing that Terry Fontenot kind of stated during his press conference at the combine is we're going to start with our players in free agency, trying to re-sign our guys. Like we have Foyer. We got to see what we're going to do with Foyer. We have to see what we're going to do with a guy like Russell Gage. We still have guys like Hayden Hurst out there. That's a free agent. CP. I mean, we have so many guys that are free agents on our own team that we really shouldn't even be focusing on what guys are out there in the market during free agency. We kind of need to focus on the guys that we need to bring back. And first things first, Foyer, CP, those are the guys that I would be looking to re-sign. Young Wei Koo, those would be the guys that in free agency for the Falcons, as far as us retaining our own players, those would be the three guys that I'm focused on trying to retain if I'm the Atlanta Falcons. But I do want to get into you guys' comments as well. Let's see. Tell Sports and Gaming. He says Grady just needs another elite on the line with him. I'm guessing he's saying elite player on the line with him. I'm hoping an elite, either a DN from Michigan or Oregon falls to us, but I'm not. But I'm hoping Marlon Davidson or John Kaminsky or another one of those three or 4-year guys step up. Yeah, we're going to need guys to step up. And I kind of mentioned this last night too. In Mike and K-Style show, I had put in the chat when they were talking last night about, us not having a lot of money. Like we're going to need to draft well in this draft. And we're going to need guys that we drafted last year to step up. Like one thing I can credit Arthur Smith, I can credit Dean Pease with last year. Majority of our draft class that we drafted, guys that we drafted last year, played right away. Jalen Mayfield was a starter. Darren Hall got some playing time at the corner position due to injuries. Richie Grant later on in the season got a lot of time due to Isaiah Oliver getting injured. Taekwon Graham, who's a guy that I'm really, really impressed with. I'm going to do a video on Taekwon Graham because he's one of those diamonds in the rough. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. It was some things he put on tape last year that I really liked. He plays like the 3 tech, and he also can slide out to defensive end. We drafted him out of Texas on the defensive line. But Marlon Davidson, Ogundeji, we're going to need all of those guys that we currently have to step up. And I talked about this last night, or I was stating this in the chat last night. Like player development is going to be huge for our Atlanta Falcons. Like the teams that consistently win, they understand that I have to continue to draft and develop players because you're going to come to the point where you can't pay everybody. And that's kind of what the Falcons have been experiencing over the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, if you guys remember Devondre Campbell, him and Deion Jones came in around the same time where the team decided to pay Deion Jones. So they couldn't afford Devondre Campbell anymore. So he ended up walking in free agency. So you had a guy like Foyer Oluokun right behind him who was able to come in and fill those shoes, who had been developing over the years. It's the same thing with guys that are free agents now, like Isaiah Oliver. If we had guys on this team that we were developing, which now we kind of do with Avery Williams, with Darren Hall, with Richie Grant, you have to have guys that you're developing and consistently developing your guys, those backup players, because eventually guys are going to have to either get cut or guys are going to get signed by other teams. Like we cut Dante Fowler. So that means somebody else is going to have to step up. The guy I think that really needs to step up for this defense on the defensive line is Marlon Davidson. I think Marlon Davidson out of Auburn, he's a guy when he plays and he's healthy, we've seen he's had flashes where he's a really good player. He had a pick 6 against Tom Brady. He had a sack against Tom Brady early in the season. I think it was week 2 of last season. So he has had his flashes where he's shown that he could be a solid player. He just needs the reps and he just has to stay healthy. That's been Marlon Davis's biggest knock is he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But one thing that I think the Falcons may do with the Marlon Davidson, or something that they could do with a guy like Marlon Davidson, is use him as a defensive end, not just as a guy on the inside. Because if you go look at Marlon Davison's tape coming out of college at Auburn, he played defensive end his last year, his senior season, and some of his junior season. He played a lot of defensive end, whether he was in a 2-point stance or whether he was playing, as just as a defensive end with his hand in the dirt. He's a guy that's very versatile, and I think that the Falcons have to use him more all around the field. Like I would use him as a defensive end a little bit more because he's a guy that can stop the run, and he's a guy that has pass rush moves, and he's a guy that's disruptive. So, like I was stating again, we have to continue to develop our talent. That's going to be the most important thing, and we have to draft well. If this Falcons team wants to compete because of the cap situation that we're in, the reason we brought in a guy like Terry Fontenot as the GM is when he was with the Saints, he was one of those guys that was a scout, and he was one of those guys that worked hand in hand with the GM of the Saints. So he knows how to go and find talent in those lower parts of the draft, those 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks. That was something that he was really good at with the Saints, of finding diamonds in the rough. And he's going to have to do that in this draft. We're going to have to strike gold. What's going on, man? I appreciate you tuning in tonight. I think this is my first time seeing you in the chat tonight, but shouts out to you. I appreciate you joining tonight. Let's see here. Tony Wright says, agreed. Hopefully with our first, second round draft pick at 43, we draft defensive tackle Travis Jones, 6'5", 333 pounds. I haven't seen his tape, but his measurables is right up my alley. I love guys that are 6'5", 6'4", tall, and 330 or 320 plus pounds. So I definitely will add this guy to my draft board or my draft prospects list, because he sounds like somebody that we definitely can use on our defensive line. Let's see. And most definitely, Mike says, ladies and gentlemen, can we get you to share this on your Facebook, Twitter feeds? It'll be greatly appreciated. I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, y'all please share out this content. Please like, share, subscribe. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate that, Mike. But I thank you guys for tuning in tonight, as always. Let's see. My boy ATM in the building. He says, what's up, Jew? In your opinion, what move do you think happens first at the beginning of free agency? Calvin Ridley trade, release Tyler Davidson and Mike Davis, or extending Grady Jarrett, Jake Matthews, and Matt Ryan? First, I think it'll be extending Matt Ryan, Grady Jarrett, or Jake Matthews. I think that's the first thing that's going to happen, because free agency happens first. So I think that's going to be the first thing that happens. The second thing that'll probably happen will be the releasing of Tyler Davidson. And I don't know if Mike Davis, believe it or not, this might sound crazy, I don't know if Mike Davis is going to get released. I think he should, but I don't know if he will, because he's still under contract, and I don't know if they want to eat the money that he has on his the money that he has. I think he has a little bit of a cap hit, like a $2 to $3 million cap hit. But the last thing I think that's going to happen is Calvin Ridley getting traded, because I think that's going to happen either during the draft or near the draft. I think it's where Calvin Ridley is going to get traded at. But I think that's going to be like one of the last things to happen. The most important thing right now is creating cap space, and that's going to be extending some of these contracts, or extending Grady, extending Jake Matthews, to create some cap space so we can bring in some free agents. Let's see. Brian People says, I think Darby's going to play with the chip on his shoulder this coming season. I agree. I love Frank Darby. I think he's one of those guys that's definitely could possibly be a diamond in the rough, because he's one of those guys that didn't get a lot of opportunities last year on the offense. But Frank Darby is physical. He's a guy that's not afraid to go across the middle. He's not afraid to go up and catch footballs and things of that nature. If you go watch his highlight tape or watch tape on him when he was at Arizona State, one of the things that I noticed when we drafted him is he's a guy that's a deep threat, and he's a guy that made a lot of contested catches in college as far as the deep ball. He did a good job of adjusting to the deep ball, and he has really good hands. So I think that Frank Darby is somebody that they're actually developing. Like I was talking about, goes back to player development. Frank Darby's a guy that they are developing, and he could easily end up being a slot receiver or end up being a guy that gets a lot of playing time because we don't have a lot of cap space. So he's one of those draft picks from last year that is going to have to step up. Let's see. Tell Sports the Gaming says Hennessy finally got a full season under his rookie year. He only played the last 2 games this season, was basically his real rookie year. In the beginning of year 3, Hennessy know what he needs to improve on. I don't know what you're asking here, but I think Hennessy is not as bad as everybody think. I think that Hennessy just needed those game reps, to be honest with you. And that's kind of why I didn't like them throwing Drew Dahlman in the game. I did like that they were trying to create competition, but I'm a strong believer, me and Mike and K Styles, is one of the things that we always talk about is chemistry. Like, you have to have chemistry on your offensive line. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of trying to restructure the offensive line. I feel like let those guys gel, like the Jalen Mayfields, the Hennessy's, Lindstrom. I think those guys did a good job later on in the season. After they kind of played a couple games together, they started to put it together. So if I'm the Falcons, I'm not drafting a center. And believe it or not, a lot of people have been talking about the Falcons like bringing in a veteran center like a Ben Jones from Tennessee. Personally, I would stick with Hennessy. That's the point of you drafting these guys. Like, if one thing we learned with the last regime that I really didn't like with Thomas Dimitroff and with Dan Quinn was they didn't do a good job of developing talent, and they didn't do a good job of using their draft picks, like playing the guys that they drafted. Like, we had Quadre Olison, we had John Kaminsky, we had so many guys that they drafted that we never used. So we didn't know what they were. So when it was time for players to actually leave or get cut or get traded or whatever, we didn't know what we had because they didn't play those guys. So if anything I can say with this new regime that I can respect is they are taking advantage of the draft picks. Like, if you draft somebody, give these guys some playing time. Like, play these guys. That's the only way you're going to find out if these guys can actually play is play them in games. Like, preseason is one thing, but putting these guys out there, in the regular season when it really matters and when they're playing against the number 1s and number 2s of other teams, that's when you're going to really find out what your team is made of and what the players are made of. So if I'm the Falcons, I'm sticking with Hennessy. I'm sticking with Jalen Mayfield. I'm giving those guys another shot to see in year 2. I'm sticking with the O-line that we had last year pretty much. Unless somebody comes in and just blows us away, like in the preseason or something like that, if they draft the offensive lineman, I'm coming back with that same front 5 and seeing if those guys can develop some chemistry. Let's see. And you guys can also go ahead, and I'm opening up for fans Q&A as well, because we're like 30 minutes into the show, and you guys know I usually end promptly at around 9 o'clock. So if you guys have questions, which I've already kind of answering you guys' questions, but definitely go ahead and start dropping your questions in the chat. And what's going on? Cookie says Travis Jones was a bully at nose tackle during the Senior Bowl. So I seen clips from the Senior Bowl. I didn't actually get to watch it. So I'm definitely going to check Travis Jones out, because this is the second time I've seen his name come up in the chat. And if Cookie's saying that he was bullying cats, I believe it. So I'm definitely going to have to check him out and see what he's made of. Because I definitely this is the second time I've heard them saying that he's one of those guys that was dominant at the Senior Bowl. So I'm going to definitely have to check it out. And you guys, like I said, go ahead and drop your questions. They call me Yeezy. Says Fourier is coming back or not? This is a good question, and I hadn't did a video on it, and this is like one of the biggest topics when it comes to our Falcons. Personally, if I'm the Falcons, I'm trying to bring back Fourier, because I'm a firm believer in you don't let great players or good players walk in free agency. Now, will he come back because of the cap number and the situation that we're in? I don't know. I really think it's going to be up to Foyer. Like if Foyer is willing to take some type of hometown discount, I could see him staying with our Falcons. But I think one thing that's going to affect the decision of if Foyer comes back, if he's asking for too much money, I can easily see them letting Foyer walk because you have Michael Walker. And this is the reason why you developed Michael Walker. So we kind of are playing with house money in this situation, even though I don't think that Michael Walker is as good as Foyer is now, because Foyer has proven to us within the last 2 seasons, he's had 100 plus tackles in both the last 2 seasons. Foyer has kind of proven that he's a dominant linebacker in this league. He led the league in tackles this year, which is hard to do. And he's been a player that's consistently stayed healthy, which a lot of the times with the linebacker position, you're constantly running up against offensive linemen, going head to head with running backs and things of that nature. Sometimes linebackers tend to get banged up. And that's something that Foyer has really shown that, to me, Foyer is a budding star. And if I'm the Falcons, I'm doing everything I can to keep Foyer in Atlanta. But if he does walk because of the cap situation, you have Michael Walker. So good news is we're in a good position at the linebacker position, whether Foyer decides to stay and take some type of hometown discount, or whether we're able to maneuver some of these contracts and extend Matt Ryan, Grady Jarrett, and make enough space for Foyer. Whether he walks or not, whether he stays or not, I think we're in a good space because you have Michael Walker, who showed flashes last year that he's a pretty good linebacker within himself. Now, one thing that kind of may hurt the Falcons, if Foyer does leave and we're not able to re-sign him, now I think you have to move Deion Jones back to the Mike linebacker position. I don't think that you can just slide Michael Walker into that position, because that makes him the signal caller. And I don't know if you want Michael Walker doing that for the first time. Can he do it? Sure, he may do it because you have Deion Jones right there, just like he was with Foyer, kind of giving him advice. But personally, if it was me, if Foyer decides to leave and get paid somewhere else, which I'm all in for players getting as much money as they possibly can, because we know football is one of those sports where injury can take place at any time that can end your career, kind of like a Ryan Shazier type situation. I want Foyer to make as much money as he can. So if he can get the bag somewhere else and we're not, offering him a competitive contract, he has to do what's best for him and his family. But I definitely think if he does walk, you may see Deion Jones go back to that Mike position as the leader, calling the defense, and then you'll just have Michael Walker kind of playing that outside role. Let's see. Do you think that Caleb McGarry will get a second contract in Atlanta, or do you have them drafting his replacement? I think with Caleb McGarry, he's kind of one of those guys that's on the fence. And what I mean by that is he hasn't done enough yet to garner a new contract. Like a guy like Chris Lindstrom. I think Chris Lindstrom, he's going to get re-signed, like in Atlanta. It's no doubt in my mind that he's going to get re-signed. Caleb McGarry is one of those guys I think that's still fighting to prove that he deserves another contract. So personally, I think that Caleb McGarry is one of those guys that may not get a second contract, to be honest with you guys. He's going to be another guy, like I was saying, that may have to take a hometown discount as well. Like he might not be able to demand a lot of money either, but I think Caleb McGarry is a solid right tackle. I don't think he's terrible, but I think he's a guy that could be replaced years down the road. I don't know if it's in this draft that they go and get his replacement, but I think that Caleb McGarry is going to still have to prove himself and prove that he deserves another contract. But I don't think it's set in stone like it is for a guy like Chris Lindstrom, where it's set in stone that he's definitely going to get another contract. Like, it's no doubt in my mind. J-Dog, what's going on, man? I appreciate you joining tonight. Definitely hit that like, subscribe button for your boy. What's going on, Millie Mills? What's happening, man? I appreciate you joining tonight. I hope you guys are enjoying your Wednesday night. Hope you guys are having a great week so far as well. And Bubba Gump said it right here. Foyer is going to walk and get the bag somewhere else. Yeah, probably will. Like, I can't see I mean, I don't know because I know that Dean Pease loves Foye and the whole team loves Foye to be real, but money talks. And this is something that Mike did a video. I think he did a rant on this. Like, money changes people and money talks. So because football is a violent sport the way that it is, if I'm Foye, I'm going to the team that I can get the most money, to be honest with you. Personally, I believe you should go somewhere where you're the best fit, but also you got to look out for your own pockets. And at this point, I definitely suggest Foye go ahead and get as much money as possible. I would love to see him stay in Atlanta because he's a really good player. But usually, great players or good players in free agency get signed by other teams. And trust me, the whole league is on notice that this man almost had 200 tackles last year, so he's probably on a lot of teams' wish list to possibly be a leading linebacker for their team. So unfortunately, that's just the kind of the burden that you bear when you have players that are really good and you don't have money. They're going to end up getting signed, by another team. Brian People says, you think we should go get a veteran DB? I don't think so. I think you can bring back, believe it or not, people might not like to hear this, but I think you can bring back like a Fabian Monroe, or you could just bring back Isaiah Oliver. Like, I really think Isaiah Oliver is going to get re-signed, but I think also Fabian Monroe, because of the way he played last year, you could probably bring him back on another 1-year deal. And because he knows Dean Pease's system, I don't feel like it makes sense unless you're going to go out and get an upgrade over a guy like Fabian Monroe. I don't really see a reason why you should move off of Isaiah Oliver or move off of Fabian Monroe if you have guys that already know the system, unless you're bringing in somebody that's familiar with Dean Pease, like that played with him in Tennessee or something like that, or played for him in New England or in Baltimore. Like, if you have one of those guys that played for him, like a Malcolm Butler or somebody like that that's out there on the free agent market, maybe you go out and sign somebody like that. But I think sticking with the guys that know Dean Pease's scheme, like the Deron Harmons at the safety position, Eric Harris, who got injured, like, these guys already know the scheme. And like I said, chemistry is key. So I definitely think that you definitely can you definitely don't necessarily need to bring in a veteran corner because you drafted a bunch of corners last year, and then you have guys like Oliver who could come back from injury. And if you want to bring Fabian Monroe back on a short 1-year deal, you can do that. But I feel like with the scheme that Dean Pease plays, he plays a scheme where it protects the cornerbacks. He plays last year we played a lot of zone coverage, a lot of cover two, where it was a lot of two high safeties where you didn't really have to worry about giving up the big play. So you don't need two lockdown corners. We already have AJ Terrell, who's that lockdown guy. Millie Bill says, Jew, do you resign OZ or nah? I think so. I think he could be a guy that comes back. Depending on how much money we have. I think OZ played really well last year. Like, a lot of people might laugh at that, but for what we were asking him to do, OZ was doing way more than he should have had to do. OZ is really like a third or fourth string wide receiver. So he's a guy that's like a specialty type player. He's like the Taylor Gabriel of the Atlanta Falcons right now. So you always need those guys that can play special teams, those guys that can do those reverse type plays, and those guys that can, take it deep. And he was one of those guys that took the top off the defense. So I like OZ a lot. I just think OZ is a smaller wide receiver. I don't think you necessarily have to bring him back, but he'll be a cheap guy you can bring back. So I think he could come back because he's not going to be expensive. And if you're trying to fill out your roster, he's another guy like I just talked about where he knows Arthur Smith's scheme because he was here last year. So if you can't re-sign Russell Gage because you're bringing back CP and you're, bringing back some of the other guys, you might not be able to bring back, Hayden Hurst, bring back all of those guys. But I think out of all of the wide receivers that we have that are free agents, OZ probably will demand the less amount of money. So he maybe end up coming back just by default because he's not going to demand a lot of money. But I think Lamade Zaccheaus played really well. And he made some huge catches for our team last year, believe it or not. Some key touchdown catches. and some big catches in the clutch due to Calvin Ridley not being there. He kind of stepped up. And to be honest, OZ probably was our second best wide receiver behind Russell Gage. To me, he played better than Tajay Sharp. So I wouldn't be mad at bringing back a guy like OZ. And let's see. Nate says they're going to get a young quarterback in the late round. Yeah, that's what I could see happening. I know K Styles loves Desmond Ritter, and I think Desmond Ritter's a guy that'll be around in like the late second round to early third round. So I think Desmond Ritter could be a guy that the Falcons go after if he's there in the later rounds. Like I said, you have I think the Kenny Pickett's of the world, and I think the guy to Liberty, Malik Willis, I think they'll be gone by the time the Falcons decide to go with a quarterback, unless we go for a quarterback with that second second round pick that we have. I think Malik Willis and the Kenny Pickett's, those guys will be gone already. So out of the lower half of the quarterback positions, like out of these guys in the draft, I probably would go with Desmond Ritter if I had to take. If Kenny Pickett is going and Malik Willis is going, those would be my first two choices for the quarterback position. I would go with like a guy like Desmond Ritter. I think he'll be still on the board like late second round, early third round, and that could be a guy that the Falcons kind of try to go ahead and bring in and kind of grown behind Matt Ryan. And Tony Wright says our receivers in 2022, Cordell Patterson, Christian Watson, Russell Gage, and Olamide Zaccheaus. That's not too bad of a receiving core, but I would throw names in there like Drake London, who I have a video that's dropping tomorrow about Drake London, a draft prospect video. You probably seen it premiering on my channel, so you guys check that out tomorrow. Guys like George Pickens is another guy that I did a video on that I really like in this draft. Treylon Burks, if you're going to go with that first round draft pick at wide receiver, those are guys that I would look at. But Christian Watson, like I said, he's another guy that's really good. But I think it's a lot of pretty good, solid wide receivers and guys with size. So one thing I'm noticing with these wide receivers in this draft, a lot of these guys are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and that's exactly what the Falcons need. Like, that's what the doctor ordered. The Falcons really need size. We talked about that last year. Like, we didn't have those bigger wide receivers, and that's why I could see us possibly moving away from Russell Gage or moving away from Olamide Zaccheaus, is those guys don't really have a lot of size. So one thing I definitely noticed about this draft is these wide receivers are big and physical, and that fits perfectly with Arthur Smith's scheme. So that's one thing that I really noticed with these guys, these wide receivers in this draft. He said, Brian People says, how about Parker Hesse? He could definitely be a guy that's going to stick around on the roster. I think he was on a one-year deal. He'll be a guy kind of like Olamide Zaccheaus, so they'll bring back probably because he bounced around last year for us on the practice squad, and then he bounced up to our active roster because of COVID. Some of the guys were out with COVID when Hayden Hurst went down with COVID and was injured for a couple games. They brought Parker Hesse up, and he's a guy that was in Tennessee with Arthur Smith. So I easily can see Parker Hesse being back with the team, especially because I forget his name now, but the tight end that we had retired. So the old tight end that we had retired from Buffalo. So being that Smith, our tight end Smith, being that Smith retired, I could definitely see Parker Hesse coming back next year. Atlanta Falcons news. What do you think about Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis meetings with the Falcons at the NFL Combine today? I think with that, like I mentioned before, the Falcons are talking and basically covering their bases. Like right now, the Falcons are doing their due diligence. Matt Corral, I'm glad that name came up because I think he's a really good quarterback and a guy that's kind of under the radar out of Ole Miss. And I will be doing a breakdown on the quarterbacks in this draft as well, doing prospect videos, because I did get one of my subscribers that asked me to do a breakdown on the quarterbacks. I kind of was staying away from the quarterbacks because we have more important things as far as bigger fish to fry when it comes to filling positional needs. But I definitely will do a breakdown on the quarterbacks as well, because I've been getting a couple different subscribers asking about the quarterbacks. But just in general, with the Falcons, Terry Fontenot and those guys meeting with these quarterbacks, I think they're just trying to pick these guys' brain. And being that Arthur Smith is an offensive guru and an offensive minded coach, he's there doing his due diligence. Like they mentioned before with the Matt Ryan situation of, if we get somebody blow us away with 3 first-round picks or 4 first-round picks for Matt Ryan, depending on the price, everything has a price tag, and they would move Matt Ryan if they got a deal that blew them away. I don't see a team offering us any crazy draft picks for Matt Ryan because of his age and because of his cap number. Like that $48 million cap hit, I don't think no team is trying to swallow that or trying to bring in Matt Ryan. That would take up most of every team's all of their cap. So with us viewing, with them talking to these quarterbacks, I think that you're just covering their bases at this point and doing their due diligence. And maybe they are legitimately looking at these quarterbacks. I really think that they are just doing their due diligence at this point. And I could see the Falcons really signing a quarterback, but I feel like at this point, Matt Ryan is probably here to stay. If they do bring in somebody, like I said, it's just for Matt Ryan to groom them for the next couple years until Matt Ryan is done. And I think this is a good question right here by Ted Sports and Gaming. He says, if one of those defensive ends from Michigan or Oregon don't fall to us, I'm definitely taking a wide receiver at 8 and then go D-line for the second round pick. Don't feel we need a cornerback. All these mocks say draft 2 last year. Exactly. I completely agree. I feel like in this draft, if the edge rushers that you want are not there, meaning if Kayvon Thibodeau is not there from Oregon, if Aiden Hutchinson, which I know is not going to be there because they're saying he's probably going to be the number 1 pick or second pick in the draft, and David Ajabo, I'm not too sure how much the Falcons like a guy like David Ajabo. If they really like David Ajabo or even George Karlaftis, if they like those guys at 8, I'll take one of those guys. Or even, I've been stating it over and over again, a lot of people don't want to hear it, but Jordan Davis. If Jordan Davis is there at 8, or if you trade back and Jordan Davis is there, that's who I'm taking. But I wouldn't even be mad at Jordan Davis at 8. Like a lot of people know, I know a lot of people think that that's a reach, but you bring in a Jordan Davis, he's basically going to be like a role player, but he's going to star in his role, and his job is going to be to make Grady Jarrett's life a lot easier, to allow Grady Jarrett to eat like we saw Aaron Donald eat last year for the Rams. Like if you get Jordan Davis, the main reason you're drafting Jordan Davis is to elevate everybody's game on the defensive line and give those guys one-on-one opportunities. So even at 8, I don't think it's too high for a Jordan Davis, because I think he'll elevate all of the guys around him, especially Grady Jarrett, because Grady Jarrett then becomes one-on-one, and nobody's trying to see Grady Jarrett one-on-one in the trenches. So I definitely think that if those guys, like you stated, Ted Sports and Gaming, if none of those guys that are those elite guys or those guys that we think are the upper echelon defensive ends in the draft or edge rushers, like the Aiden Hutchinson, like the Thibodeaus, then I am going wide receiver. And if we go wide receiver, I'm going Traylon Burks. I'm going Drake London out of USC. Or I'm going, probably wouldn't go George Pickens that early, because I think George Pickens is a guy you can trade back for. But I'm definitely at least going with those two that I mentioned, Drake London or Traylon Burks. Those are the two guys that I'm taking if I'm the Falcons, if they're there at 8. I think those two guys are beasts, and I really think that those guys would automatically come in and be number 1 type wide receivers because of their build and because of their skill set. And Cookie says, do you think the Falcons take, I don't even know how to say that name, so I'm not going to mess it up, Charles Cross if they are there at 8? with no pass rushers. I don't think the Falcons go. And I think the one guy that I can't pronounce his name, I think that's the guy from Louisville, if I'm not mistaken, or is at North Carolina State. I get it mixed up, but I know their colors are red and white. But I think both of those guys are beasts at the offensive line. But I wouldn't take an offensive lineman with the 8th pick, believe it or not. I just wouldn't do it because the Falcons have spent, to me, too much draft capital on the offensive line. You have Chris Lindstrom, you have Caleb McGarry, and I'm a firm believer in you need to be able to protect your quarterback, but I'm a firm believer in you can find offensive lineman talent later in the draft. You just have to have the right person pulling the trigger, meaning Terry Fontenot or whoever's drafting. You just have to have good scouts. If you have good scouts, you will be able to find offensive linemen later in the draft. And I feel like at this point, you can't have an offensive line full of first round picks. That's just me personally. I feel like at some point, some of these guys you're going to have to just develop. You're going to have to develop some of these guys. I mean, I feel like we're spending too much draft capital already on the offensive line with first round picks because we did that the last year that TD was here where he basically double dipped with Lindstrom and McGarry. And I think he kind of reached when he did that. And he kind of put us in a bad situation that we're in now by trading back up for Caleb McGarry. So at this point, I wouldn't take an offensive lineman in the first round, even though we seen Jalen Mayfield struggle. I think later on in the draft or even bringing in a veteran offensive lineman, I feel like the offensive line will improve through development, really, and with bringing in guys that you can piece together offensive line. And kind of just to elaborate a little bit more on this offensive line situation, if you guys remember when in 2016 when we brought in Chris Chester from the Redskins at the time, and we brought in Andy Levitre from the Tennessee Titans to play the guard position. We basically just went out and signed veteran guys that fit the scheme, and Kyle Shanahan was able to work magic with those guys, and the offensive line coach was able to work magic. So that just goes to show you in that year, those guys were able to play all 16 games and play all the way through the playoffs. But you really didn't have like Pro Bowl guys on that offensive line. Other than Alex Mack and Jake Matthews, those other guys were just free agent guys we brought in that were veterans. And that just goes to show you that you don't have to have, all number one picks on your offensive line to be successful. I wouldn't be disappointed if the Falcons decide to take an offensive lineman with 8, but I just think that you got bigger fish to fry. And I feel like because the weapons were horrible last year for Matt Ryan, other than Kyle Pitts, I feel like you can't neglect the defensive line and you can't neglect the wide receivers in skill positions because last year we didn't have any receivers and we really didn't have any edge rushers. Minus Dante Fowler with his 4.5 sacks, we didn't really get any production at all from Steven Means. We didn't get any production at all for most of the guys that we had. Ogundeji, I think, gave you like a 2.5 sacks or 2 sacks, but we really didn't get much production. So those wide receiver and defensive end or edge or defensive line, those got to be the two things that we tackle before anything, even before the offensive line. But with that being said, we're coming up on the last 7 minutes of the show. So I definitely want to tackle a couple more questions before we get off here. Let's see. And y'all keep y'all questions coming for me. And this is the name that's really interesting. This Penn State edge rusher. I did see his name a lot. And I think that he's a guy that the Falcons may also look at drafting. I think that he's a sleeper in the draft. I wouldn't be upset if the Falcons take him, but I think if I were the Falcons, I would double dip in this draft and take multiple edge rushers. So he probably will be the second guy that we take, Ebikite Arnold, whatever his name. Yeah, I think he's a guy that Mel Kiper's been talking a lot about, and Todd McShay also brought up. So I think he's a sleeper for the Falcons. I definitely think that they could possibly bring in that Penn State edge rusher. And I think he'll be a guy that could possibly be around in the second round or maybe even late second round, third round, depending on how he does at the combine and how people, view his tape. But I think he could be a sleeper guy that nobody's really talking about. And I definitely can see him being a guy that the Falcons could easily take. But like I said, I definitely would double dip from the Falcons. I would take multiple rushers in this draft. I wouldn't just stick with, going with the top guy. Even if you're able to get a Kayvon Thibodeau, even if you're able to get a David Ajabo, I'm coming back and I'm taking another edge rusher, or even Jermaine Johnson. He's another guy that the Falcons are looking at, and I like his game a lot as well. And Ricky Gaines, what's going on, man? I appreciate you tuning in tonight. He says, if we don't take a wide receiver in the early rounds, who is a sleeper in the rounds 4 to 7? So I haven't broke down enough wide receivers yet as far as tape to know who's a guy that I would take, like, that nobody's talking about. Christian Watson was a sleeper that nobody really talking about, but now he's kind of on the map. So I definitely have to continue to, get into a lot of these players' tape. I haven't been able to go that deep yet to see what other wide receivers are out there. But this kid you're mentioning out of North Carolina State, I have to check him out. I haven't seen Emeka. I haven't seen this guy, so I don't know how good he is. But I definitely will check him out. But with that being said, we have about 5 more minutes in the show. So if you guys don't have any other questions, I will be getting off here in a moment. But you guys definitely join that Jew Talk Sports membership. I really appreciate those who have joined the Jew Talk Sports membership. It is $2.99, $4.99 if you guys would like to join. If you are a member, some of the perks that you get, I will be doing giving videos, like you can have content control over the next video that I make. Even though right now I'm basically just putting out my prospect videos, but if there's a prospect that you want me to break down, definitely let me know. If you're a member, you definitely get first dibs on telling me what player you want me to break down and things of that nature and what video you want me to do. But I do, like I said, appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in tonight. Stay tuned to the channel because I'll have a lot more coming for you guys as well. Not just the prospect videos, but I definitely got my eyes peeled on the combine. Definitely are going to keep you guys up on the latest Atlanta Falcons news and rumors that are out there. Right now, like I said, everything is the combine. So we'll see, what happens at the combine, because I'm sure some players that we aren't mentioning are going to show out at the draft. So we definitely got to keep our eyes peeled, or show out at the combine, excuse me. So we definitely got to keep our eyes peeled. But definitely stay tuned to my channel. Stay tuned to Mike's channel. Stay tuned to K-Styles channel, because we are doing the prospect videos and we all are breaking down different prospects. So definitely make sure you have you've hit the notification bell on our videos. But on my channel in particular, I am going to be doing premiered videos a lot more. It's just easier for me that way to have videos already prepared for you guys, so you guys will know what's coming up next. So like I said, tomorrow at 6 a.m., I have a video dropping on Drake London, the wide receiver out of USC. He's a guy that's very intriguing, 6'5", 210 pounds, and one of those guys that I think will fit the Atlanta Falcons scheme perfectly as a number 1 wide receiver or a number 2 wide receiver. But I definitely think having him as a tandem with Kyle Pitts and Drake London, that could be a really, really scary tandem with 2 guys that's both 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 200 plus pounds, coming downhill, blocking in the run game. Like, I think that would be scary. And Drake London is kind of built like a tight end, where you could maybe use those guys as well if you draft or bring back CP or bring back Russell Gage. You possibly can use both of those guys too as double tight end sets, because Drake London has the body type where not only can he play wide receiver, but he's a guy that you can line up on the edge of your line like a tight end and use him in that way as well. So don't want to tell you guys too much about the video. Just check out the video tomorrow on Drake London. But with that being said, it's been it's almost about 8. It's like 1 minute to 8 p.m. Or 9 p.m. Excuse me. So I do appreciate each and every one of you guys joining me tonight. But as always, Falcons Nation, I'll holler at you guys. Definitely, like I say, stay tuned to the channel. Continue to share out my content. Help your boy get to 2K. But with that being said, this being your boy Jew. I'll holler at you guys in the next video or the next live show. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. Peace.